Yes, let's go live because that's what this show is called. It's called Unfound Live, actually. How is everybody doing out there? This is Unfound Live for April 29th of 2024. The month has flown by. I cannot believe that I've been back in Florida for about a month now since I went up and spent some time with my dad in March. I just don't know where the time goes. Probably because I'm so dang busy. Most likely. So we're on the verge of May, which means the summer is just about here. Looking forward to this summer. A lot of great things going on. I'm looking forward to the Olympics. I'm looking forward to, they got the big European soccer tournament this summer. They got the big, what they call the Copa America that's happening here in the United States for the most part with the U.S. and Canada and Mexico playing against a bunch of teams from South America. That's going to be fantastic this summer. Lots and lots of things to entertain ourselves this coming summer. So before I go any further, as you are watching tonight, please give this video a thumbs up. Please like it. Do whatever you got to do. And please subscribe to this channel. Please hit the subscribe button, which is down there in the bottom right-hand corner if you are watching on YouTube. If you're watching on the Facebook page, I appreciate it. If you're watching on Twitter, that would be really special because I have a spectacular show lined up for you tonight. What am I going to be talking about tonight? I want to talk about this true crime presentation, kind of a show that I went to on last Friday night. Got an update on Natasha and Susan Carter. Got a big-time update. I need to thank Sharif for letting me know about this big-time update for Suzanne Morphew. I want to talk about, of course, this trucker, David Schultz. Very sadly, he's been found deceased. I want to talk about that some. So, got a lot to cover in the next couple of hours. But just one personal thing before I, not to gross everybody out, but, I have a reputation for having a pretty solid stomach. And for the first time in years, I threw up on what would it be early Friday morning, and I think I know why. So, but I'm just going to leave it at that. As I've talked to you many times, in fact, some of you have even sent me messages, emails, or whatever, when I've talked about the digestive problems that I have to work around in my life, that you've sent me emails, messages. Hey, I have the same thing. And it's, I guess, misery loves company. But throwing up is really not something in my repertoire, but it happened. I'm fine now, but certainly something there on Thursday night did not agree with me. And so I ended up throwing the things out that I ate that evening. I'm not sure what it was, but they're all gone now. But since then, I've felt fine, eating, no problem, no health issues with Ed. But wow, it was something. That was no fun. Of course, the good thing about it is as soon as you're done, it's like it never happened. It's really weird like that. So other than that, it's been a pretty boring week, I guess, for me. My trivia team lost last Wednesday, so that wasn't any fun. But really, that's been about it. Been really working, contacting people. And maybe yesterday was as good an indicator of my week. Yesterday, of course, yesterday was Sunday. I had a talk with the daughter of a missing woman in Ohio at 1:00. I had an interview at 3:00. They went a couple hours. Then I did the think tank at 7:00. Of course, patreon.com/unfound podcast. And then I did another interview at 9:00. That was my day yesterday. Doing a lot of talking. And boy, did I feel it. My voice felt it at the end of yesterday. And even today, I'm kind of feeling a little bit. And in fact, I'll even admit I took a little bit of an afternoon snooze today. So that's kind of just how things have been going, reaching out to people, talking to people. Always great to do interviews and kind of work ahead, I guess you could say, a little bit. And as you know, I kind of had to move things around because I thought I was going to do an interview. Then the person backed out. And so that's why I moved the update episode up a week. And then, of course, this past Friday, we got to talk about the disappearance of David Fugate. So it's been busy around here. Something else that went on. I don't know if she's in here in the chat tonight, but last week also I got together with Lisa Kassoon and her husband Lutchman, two of my favorite people. And Lisa, going way back to 2017, was the guest for her brother's disappearance, Chip Campbell. He went missing up there in the panhandle of Florida. He's still missing, very sadly. But I got together with them for the first time. We figured out that we had not gotten together for lunch since 2022. Really a long time. You know, I've gotten together with them. They live, I guess, not too far away from here, about an hour or so north of here. And we usually get together for lunch like a couple times a year, but we figured out that we had not gotten together at all in 2023. I was like, what's going on here? So we had a great time. We met it up at a Chili's halfway between us, and like 2.5 hours went by like that. And we really didn't talk disappearances that much. We talked about a lot of other things, but not that for whatever reason. Just talked about our families, talked a little bit about drag racing. I didn't know that her husband Lutchman had been into drag racing one time, which is fantastic. So we just had a really good time. I like getting together and meeting guests, even though I've not met many of Unfound's guests in person. That's what happens when you feature disappearances all over the United States and Canada and elsewhere. And I'm just not covering disappearances from here in the Tampa area, I guess. So that's just what is going on with me. Actually, it's been a pretty good week. I love being busy. I love talking to people. And I love it when people don't flake. and yep, we did the interview. They showed up, and whether through Zoom or whatever. And I can't wait for some of you or all of you to hear these interviews over the next few Fridays. So let's see who is in here. And then we're going to get right into the true crime stuff. Nephew Charles, what's going on? Fishing, good to see you. Karen, everything. Yes, it's about that time. It is. Jasmine. Yeah, what's going on? Michelle, good to see you. Glenn. Glenn is a new member of the think tank. Thank you so much, Glenn. Good to see you. And Hazel, good to see you from where? New Zealand. And Assistant Cherie, good to see you. Thank you for moderating tonight. And Marty's in here on time, just about on time, 9:01. I'm going to call that on time, Marty, being that it was 9:01. I'm going to say you were on time. Hello, Marty. And Kathy, good to see you. Hazel asks, undercooked wings. No, not undercooked wings. No, they were not the culprit, Hazel. Yeah, that would be it would be horrible. Dane, good to see you. Ed, take care of that GIS. I know I do take care of it. Like I said, I think this was I don't want to make a prediction on what exactly. I think I know what it was, but I don't think I want to get into that publicly. But it was bad, but everything's good now. I have no health problems. Just want to tell everybody. Salmonella. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever had that, Marty. Kathy says, my youngest sister got salmonella. Wow. Yeah, 20. Kathy remembers that from 25 years ago. Okay, Kathy. Marty says, I think I earned a 1 minute grace period. You have earned a 1 minute grace period. Yeah, 901. That's totally fine, Marty. Okay. All right, let's get into what I want to talk about tonight. I'm going to first talk about this presentation that I went to on Friday night. My buddy Dana Smith went with me. Dana, I got to know him through disc golf, and he's a lot of times an assistant tournament director for many of the tournaments I play here in the Tampa area. We share both a love of heavy metal and a lot of the same rock bands and songs. So he and I might remember he went with me to see Iron Maiden once, went to see Styx. What else have we seen? We saw Megadeth with Misfits once. And so we've gone to some concerts together. We're about the same age. And so his wife allows him to get out of the house once in a while. And so I'd gotten these tickets. I'd found out, the way this happened was some months ago, I was looking for concerts that are going to be coming to the Tampa area. I'm always looking for that. And I came across this show that was coming to the Capitol Theater, which is right over here. I can almost see it from the east side of the building. This show called Psychology of Serial Killers was going to be coming to that theater. Interesting. And I'm not much into serial killers, but I've discovered by talking about them on this live show, maybe I know more about them than I realize. And so I thought, well, I want to check that out. But then I saw that this woman, her name is Dr. Rachel Tolles, was going all around she's going on a tour, like on a band. She's going to these different cities and different theaters and everything else. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. So, I was like, well, that's something I would like to do. So I actually contacted the touring company, and I think I mentioned this some weeks ago. I actually talked to this guy, one of the people who works for this company that has arranged this, and they are going to have, I think, another tour that just started regarding true crime, and it has to do with like ghosts or something. But they do most of their stuff is outside of that. They are also the touring company, management company for like the touring version of Price is Right and Wheel of Fortune and all that. They do a lot of that as well. So I wanted to talk to somebody there because, of course, that might be something that I would like to do. And he and I had a conversation some weeks ago. Who knows what will ever happen. But I did get tickets because I wanted to see, what this was all about. I wanted to, I read about it. Dana said he would happily go. And Dana kind of does get into some true crime stuff himself. So I thought, he might like it too. And by the way, if you don't know how we work this out, I buy the tickets and then he pays for dinner and we just call it even. That's how I do it. Because a lot of times, being that I'm a single guy, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find somebody to go with me or not for a lot of these things that I buy tickets for. And of course, my brother has gone with me sometimes to some concerts, and kind of Dana has been the other person has gone with me. But when I buy these tickets, like 2 of them, I'm never sure if I'm going to find somebody to go or not. So that I find somebody, That's pretty good. And really, it's a deal for them because dinner, my part of dinner, never costs as much as some of these tickets are. But I'm just happy to not go by myself. Go, and I don't mind going by myself. I've certainly gone to things by myself, but because I am a lone wolf like that. But if I get somebody to go, it's cool. It was good. The presentation was good. I think from an information standpoint, and it was good. She was up there on the stage. It was a pretty decent showing. It wasn't sold out, but it was a nice showing for the theater, I think. I don't think they could be too disappointed by how many people showed up. But she actually had videos of like Jeffrey Dahmer being interviewed, John Wayne Gacy being interviewed, Ted Bundy being interviewed. And then she would use those as part of, she is a doctor in psychology and she's studied these serial killers, although I don't think she ever interviewed any of them. Of course, Ted Bundy has been dead for a while. He's executed. Jeffrey Dahmer was killed in prison 30 years ago. She also covered Al Kemper. She also talked about Eileen Wuornos, which of course was relevant, being that she was kind of course, here in Florida, got executed eventually here in Florida. So it was from that point of view and her reasoning and her methodology and her presenting how she thinks these people become the killers that they become was certainly interesting. Once again, even though I'm not much of a serial killer guy. And then, so there was like that first part with the videos and her presentation, her reasoning that went for a little over an hour, I guess. And then there was a 15-minute break. And then in the second half, it was all Q&A. And you got to submit your questions to her before the show started. So there was like, how they do those QR code things or the squares or whatever. You put your phone up, it would take you to the website. You could type in, your name, your email address or whatever. And then the question that you would like for her to answer about serial killers. And then, of course, just take a few. And going back to when Bruce Dickinson, I went to see him a couple years ago. That must have been 2022. He did the same thing. It was the same thing. He was talking about his book that he wrote and being with Iron Maiden and everything that Bruce Dickinson's been into. And it was the same thing. You submitted questions before the presentation started, and then he would pick out the ones that he wanted to answer. And I'll get to that, because she did answer my question. You have to remember there was, 500 people there. Maybe that's a little under it. And she answered maybe 10 questions, and one of those questions was mine. So we'll get to that. So that was pretty special. And I did video it when she answered it. And if you are a Patreon or YouTube supporter, you have access to that answer. For everybody else, you got to become a Patreon member or hit the join button below if you want to hear her answer to my question. I'll get into that in a moment. Because when she said Ed has a question, and then read my question, I was like, oh, that's me. And so I videoed it. And so in the second half, it was Q&A, and that also went for about an hour. So it was an hour of just her talking, doing her presentation, 15-minute break, and then another hour of Q&A. And I thought all the questions were pretty solid. So overall, pretty good. So I thought for the price of the tickets and everything, I thought you got your money's worth. The only problem I had, too much humor. And when I had talked to this guy from the touring company that's set all of this up, he actually requested that if I did go to the show, that he would want me to email him back and tell him what I thought of it. And so I did that today. And I'm going to just tell all of you what I told him. In that, very, very high marks for the presentation, the information, having the video and how she has really thought about this and studied these killers and everything. I thought that was really, really good. And if it had just been that, I think everybody who went to that show on Friday night would have been more than satisfied. That alone would have been plenty, I think. But too much humor. I wouldn't say it was a comedy show. I don't want to mislead anybody. It wasn't like a comedy show. But I just thought that the humor that was put into the presentation, both in her own presentation by herself and then in the Q&A, I try not to be a stick in the mud about this, but I just find it to be very distasteful. I realize that on any topic you could ever cover, maybe randomly you run into something that is funny. And I also realize that even with something like the Holocaust, with all the Jews that have gotten killed, even, Mel Brooks, made fun of that, making fun of the Nazis and all of that with the producers and, Springtime for Hitler and all that. I get it. But those people are actually comedians. That is their job. That is their business. And being that I do believe in free speech, they're in that business. Their job is to make people laugh. And if you think it's going to not be something that, if there's going to be humor that you find to be distasteful, you just don't watch it. You just don't go. Because a lot of these, the shticks and routines of these comedians are all very well known. Whereas, as I wrote and told the guy today, there's not one person who went to the presentation on Friday night that was expecting humor. And surely there wasn't one person who left the show on Friday night that was saying, man, I wish there would have been more humor in that. The reason that everybody showed up on Friday night to hear Dr. Rachel Toles talk and do her presentation is because of the subject matter, not because they were going to get, kicks out of it. And so I'll be honest, that's what I wrote this guy. Like I said, high marks for the presentation, very low marks for putting humor into it. So it may be coming to your area, and I'm not telling you not to go. I'm not doing that. But, and I like I said, I thought that the ticket prices here, I know ticket prices can vary from city to city, location to location. So I'm not going to tell you how much it costs. I don't want, that you can go out there and fight it for yourself. It's all public. It's all over the United States where she's going. You can decide if it's worth your while or not. And I'm not telling you not to go. I found it very interesting. I thought that the questions that she chose to answer were excellent. I thought that she answered them. She didn't try to work her way around them just as a springboard to talk about something else, as sometimes speakers do, especially politicians. She didn't do that. And she's obviously knowledgeable. She cares about the topic. She's knowledgeable about it. But I don't know if it was her idea or somebody helping her put the show together. But the humor just didn't work for me. Now, granted, she did get some laughs, but I wouldn't say a lot of them. There were certainly things that were planned jokes within the presentation that, like I said, I don't know if every person, chuckled at every joke that was made. I just thought it was distasteful. Once again, I realize that once in a while when I'm interviewing some guests, we may run into something that is unexpectedly funny. Maybe a name or some sort of coincidence. You never know what you're going to run into, even though the interviews that I do are outlined for every guest. But that's not planned. It's not planned. So I guess I enjoyed it, But I think my buddy Dana was more into it than I was. Dana, I think his taste in true crime is more along the murder lines. He knows I do disappearances. We certainly talk about them. He does take an interest in my podcast. Because of the way I am, I don't go out and ask people if they're listening to my podcast. I never ask my family. I never ask my friends. I never ask anybody who I disc golf with and everything. It just seems a little too forward to me. It's just the way I am. So, but I think, he probably, in the end, would probably give it higher marks than I would. Maybe just from the standpoint that he didn't maybe mind the humor as much as I did. But still, I'm not telling you not to go. You want to get online and see if Dr. Rachel Tolles is appearing in a city near you. I think you should think about it. And then you could come on here, email me, message me, and tell me what you think, about her presentation, the show that she did, and we can have a really good conversation about it. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm turning off anybody of going to the show. I'm not. I'm just giving you my review of it. It was really interesting to see these actual interviews. Of course, some of these interviews are pretty old because some of these guys aren't around anymore, but Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, they've been dead for years. But interviews were, very interesting. And maybe some of you have seen some of them. But I thought it was interesting how they were all kind of put together and how she was going from one to the next. And she was going through, what happens, in her opinion, with each of these people. They became these killers that they were. And how, and of course, in some ways, they're a little different as well. So I think I could do something like this, but I don't know if I'm looking for that opportunity, trying to generate that opportunity. But I have to tell you, if I were to get involved in something like that, there's no way that I could do it the way she did it. Certainly to a high level of being informative and everything. But if anybody that I would be involved with in putting this all together would insist, oh, we got to mix a little humor here and everything, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I was thinking about it today as I was emailing this guy, and I was thinking, if you ever have gone to let's say a Titanic exhibition where they have like artifacts from the Titanic, things were on the Titanic, things that have been pulled up with the Titanic. And I know that at least at one time, these kind of, these shows were like touring from, going from museum to museum around the United States, or even maybe all over the world, something like that. To my knowledge, there's not a comedy section where you go in there and it's nothing but jokes about people dying on the Titanic. Pretty sure. But still, people go. People are interested. They want to see these things. They want to read. They want to hear those untold stories about people who died on the Titanic and people who survived. They're going for that. They're not going to laugh. So that's what I got to be me. So that's what I told this guy today. He's the one that asked me to reply. But that was Psychology of Serial Killers. Like I said, I hope that she has a very successful tour. I hope she does well, can be able to continue to do it. I hope the touring company and everything is making money. But the humor part of it is just found it distasteful. So what everybody is saying, Psychology of Serial Killers, like Hazel says, is very interesting. I would have liked to go. Florida was just a bit far. Look at you, Hazel. Well, it's all over the United States. And for all I know, Hazel, they may be, if it's successful, maybe they'll be taking it to other countries. I really don't know. But it does seem to me it was very, of course, United States centric because we have so many serial killers. Although Jack the Ripper was mentioned, and I think maybe a couple other serial killers from other countries were mentioned. We start talking about Jeffrey Dahmer and the rest of them, we know those are all Americans because we're all crazy over here. So maybe that kind of thing, being so American centric, wouldn't fly in some other places, but maybe. Serial killing ain't no laughing matter, Hazel. Well, I think it's a laughing matter to the killers. I shouldn't be a laughing matter to anybody else. What's going on, Fishing? Good to see you. So that was a Friday night. And by the way, one more thing. As I've mentioned before, and and maybe all of you can even see that when you're looking at the chat here on Monday nights, or even like in the discussion group on Facebook or wherever else, that I am, I know it myself. I know the demographics of Unfound, and the audience is 80% women. But that's, of course, something that I just like see on a computer screen. It's certainly something to experience that in person, because it was certainly true on Friday night. I mean, there were guys there, certainly, but I'm serious when I think the split might have been 80% women, 20% guys. Maybe it wasn't that drastic. Maybe 70%, 30%, something like that. But that was certainly true. And we also have to remember it was a Friday night. And so a lot of these women really got dressed up to go to this thing. They must have really made a night of it. And they go with their friends. I mean, there were many women there, and they kind of just went as groups. It was not unusual to see 5 or 6 women, going in there together as their night out. So they probably went to dinner, got a little dressed up, and then went to the show regarding serial killers. And I wonder why I'm single at 53. It's just okay. But it was like I said, it was interesting to see that as well. And there you go. Although I did not run into any Unfound listeners, unfortunately. So that was Psychology of Serial Killer, of Serial Killers, if you want to check that out. All right, moving on. So that was my, would I go to, maybe you're also wondering, if there's some other type of speaker going around kind of this thing, would you go? Absolutely. I mean, it's what I do. Even though serial killers really isn't what I do, it's still like within the genre. And I'll go check it out. Sure. Being that this one had an element that I didn't particularly like, would not deter me from maybe checking another one out. Now, like I said, the same company has something regarding ghosts or whatever. I'm not going to that. But if somebody's, if there's some other specialist or investigator that's going to be going around doing a speaking engagement like that, I probably would go. All right, moving on. Let's talk about David Fugate. He, of course, was the guest, or not the guest. Daryl Fugate was the guest. David was the topic of Friday's episode, coming out of Covington, Ohio. He went missing on February 29th of 2020. So coincidentally, on the leap day of that year, I think that's the first time, pretty sure that's the first time we've covered a disappearance on that day in Unfound's existence. And I did a map video. I hope you watched it. But I can posted a poll in the discussion group, as I usually do. And I asked, did David Fugate walk off? And surprisingly, 75% of you said yes, he did. I have to admit, I was thinking that would be the opposite. I thought 75% would say he did not walk off and there was foul play. I was surprised. The people who actually took part in the poll said that, yes, David Fugate walked off on his own. The think tank, which takes place 7 p.m. Eastern every Sunday evening. And once again, you should be part of it. We had our newest member join, Glenn, who is in the chat tonight. Thank you, Glenn. Patreon.com/Unfound podcast. Please support this podcast by joining. Also, in the think tank last night, the decision was made that David walked off on his own. Although maybe Charlotte, you're in here tonight. You're a member of the think tank. You're kind of going the foul play direction. Totally fine. But the majority of people in the think tank last night decided also that David Fugate walked off. And then for the blog that I write there, I also record it, although it's not been posted yet. I had to finish today because I was so busy yesterday talking to everybody yesterday. I did finish the blog today. It will be posted for all you Patreon people tomorrow morning, probably, because I have to do the audio version as well. I've also decided that David voluntarily walked off. That does not necessarily mean that I think he is deceased now, though. I think there's a better chance than maybe we might think that David is still around out there somewhere, figuring out how to survive. And we have to remember that there are a lot of people who are living on the streets of the United States that suffer from the same conditions that David did. Paranoid schizophrenia, PTSD. The only big difference, I would say, is David was a lot older than the average age of a homeless person, pretty sure. So could that affect whether he's still alive over 4 years later? It could. But I don't want anybody to think, because I think that David walked off, that then 4 years later that I think he is deceased. That it seems, at least in my opinion, the way I looked at it, that he took clothes and a bag with him, and Daryl said his shaving kit. This causes me to believe that he was not having suicidal thoughts, even though that we know that paranoid schizophrenics kill themselves at a higher rate than the general population. So, of course, the same true with people with PTSD. But at least when he left that day, seems he had ideas about continuing to live. And as you know, I don't argue, with people about theories or anything else. If you think that Joe or somebody else caused David's disappearance, totally understand that. But that is what went on, the theorizing and the deciding over this past weekend for people who have listened to the episode. Seems a lot of people, if the think tank and the discussion group or any, if you can extrapolate that out to the entire audience, it does seem that like 75% of the people who are going to listen to that episode are going to think that David walked off. So I hope I can continue to stay in touch with Daryl, and I will, of course, reiterate to him that just because and many people think that David walked off does not mean that he is deceased. I think that he should hold out hope that David is out there somewhere doing something, surviving somehow, even though there's, no facts to support that. Moving on, being that I talked about Caleb Harris at least once since he went missing at the beginning of March. The newest episode of Unfound now was made public today. And by the way, if you're a Patreon member or a member of the YouTube channel, you get that early, if you don't know. But it was made public today, and I go through my reasoning of what I think happened to him. Of course, he went missing on March 4th of this year from Corpus Christi, Texas. Maybe to remind some of you, if that doesn't ring a bell, maybe it does. His disappearance has been featured all over the United States, kind of gained nationwide attention. But coincidentally, Assistant Cherie, moderator Cherie's daughter, used to live in that same complex where Caleb lived. What a coincidence. And he was the young man who ordered Uber Eats and then disappeared while seemingly waiting for the Uber Eats delivery person to show up. And he sent a Snapchat at like 3:03 a.m. of him being right down the street. He was out there in his bare feet, right down the street from his apartment complex at 3:03 a.m. And then by the time 3:12 a.m. rolled around, that is when his phone stopped pinging. The last ping was from a tower in the area from where he lived, and it has never bounced off any tower since then. To my knowledge, no calls, no texts, nothing. And the main point, I don't want to give away too much. I hope you will go and watch that or listen to it. And please give that video a thumbs up. The only thing I want to say about that is, like I said, it's a little over a half hour long. You know how long these Unfound Nows go. I realize some people, does it really need to be that long? Yeah, for what I do, it does. Yes, it does. I think we all just have to be hesitant to put things into the evidence locker that shouldn't be there. We should never put anything into the evidence locker that is just from our imaginations. I think that's one of the three main points I make for Caleb's disappearance. But of those three, that's probably the biggest one, in my opinion, being that I came up with the learning points for it. Because we do that a lot, myself included. We have these creative minds, these big brains, and we love to visualize and imagine and daydream and all these things. And we can do that. It's very hard not to do that. But we always have to make sure just because we imagine something doesn't make it a fact. And we're best off just putting into the evidence locker those things that are facts and then end up being wrong that way than the opposite, where we put imaginary things into the locker and are wrong that way. It's my opinion. So please check that out. Unfound Now, Caleb Harris, who went missing from Corpus Christi, Texas on March 4th of 2024. It came out on the YouTube channel today. All right. An update. This is like, I think I've talked about this so much already, but I'm going to talk about these murders, disappearances that are murders that have been now solved for sure. And that is Natasha and Susan Carter. But before I do, let's see what everybody's saying here in the chat. Hazel's asking me, did anyone catch my eye at the at the show on Friday night? Hazel, I will say there seemed to be some very nice women there on Friday night. Certainly. And surely, let's just put it this way. If I could go to more places and events and things like that, where the population was like 80% women and they were around my age, I would probably certainly be doing more socializing and all that stuff more than I do. But yeah, the answer, did anyone catch my eye? Not anyone particular. The problem is probably too many of them caught my eye, Hazel. The 80s, I couldn't be less interested in ghosts unless it's Ghostbusters. Yeah, and even that, the 80s, just the first Ghostbusters movie. All the movies since, in my opinion, no good. Hazel, so I think David went round to Joe's to get some weed to self-medicate due to wife's death. Okay, Hazel. Glenn, as the newest member of the think tank, is saying the think tank is great. Thank you, Glenn. Hope to see you there for many Sundays to come. Hazel, Caleb's disappearance was a real strange one. I listened to it yesterday on my way to acupuncture. All right, be careful with those needles, Hazel. Delane is here. Hello, Delane. Charlene is here. Hello, Charlene. What's going on, Charlene? What's going on over there in Europe? Good to see you. All right, Natasha and Susan Carter. An ailing West Virginia man confessed on his deathbed to killing a mother and her 10-year-old child nearly a quarter century ago and led investigators to their bodies. Larry Webb, 82, said he shot and killed Susan Carter and her daughter, Natasha Alex Carter, in August of 2000, and then buried their bodies in a shallow grave in the woods on his property. I got this one right. The remains of the mom and daughter were discovered on Webb's Beckley property Monday. And the weird thing is, if you don't know, when I'm driving back and forth between Pennsylvania and Florida, I drive within about a half mile of his house because I go right through Beckley, West Virginia. Webb's Beckley property Monday, roughly 6 hours after their killer died at Mount Olive Correctional Complex in Fayette County, and what police called a bit of a poetic ending. He died on the same day that their bodies were found. Webb said he had gotten into an argument with Susan, who was living in his home with her daughter, over money and shot her. He said he was missing cash and believed that she had taken it and spent it. After fatally shooting Susan, Webb said he knew he had ruined his life forever, investigators said. He then shot little Alex dead so there would be no witnesses. This is exactly what I want to pat myself on the back too much. But this is what I said. He killed Susan, then had to kill Natasha because she knew what happened. Once he had killed both individuals, he had stored them in the basement of the home where he cried himself to sleep that night. And then over the course of the next 2 nights, dug a shallow grave in the woods on his property. Webb said was previously indicted for Alex's death in October 2023 and was placed in custody earlier this month after the FBI took up the cold case in 2021. Investigators searched his home last year and found a bullet embedded in the wall of what was the girl's bedroom. It's weird that he never tried to fix that. The bullet was tested for DNA, which confirmed that the blood on it belonged to the 10-year-old girl. Webb reportedly confessed to the murders in a come-to-Jesus moment on his deathbed during the first week of April. Alex's father, Rick Lafferty, guest of Unfound, who was in a custody battle with Susan over their daughter at the time of her death, said he was thankful to investigators for finally closing the case. Kind of a sad day, he said, but also a happy day because I can bring my baby home. Wow. This, since Unfound started 7.5 years ago, of course, we've covered a lot of bizarre situations. This is certainly another one. We've now covered a disappearance that ended up being a murder in which the killer confessed on his deathbed and the missing people were found on the same day. This is kind of like, what you might see in Law and Order or something like that. So it's happened. I guess it was bound to happen. You cover enough disappearances, I guess this is bound to happen, that we have some sort of deathbed confessional. In fact, unfortunately, though, we've experienced the opposite, where killers don't want to say anything. And we firmly believe that they will go to their graves with their secrets, knowing what happened and where the missing person is, missing woman, missing man, whoever, and they will never tell anybody. So, Larry Webb, you were certainly a bad guy. The only reason you got together with Susan Carter because she was a lot younger than you were and you liked the way she looked. And you paid a very, very heavy price for that. And you killed her. You were a very evil guy and then killed her daughter too. But I also want to thank you for not taking that to your grave. I don't know if for all of you, if you believe in that type of thing, the afterlife and all of that, I don't know if he will be redeemed or whatever else. Once again, if you believe in that type of thing, but I will speak for all of the humans on earth here in the material world that I appreciate it that you did not go to your death with that secret. Thank you for owning up to it. Thank you for telling them where they could find, admitting to it, exactly what happened. Thank you for telling them where they could find the bodies. I thank you for that. But otherwise, you are a horrible, horrible person. And I wish that many of these other suspects that we have mentioned on Unfound would do the same thing that Larry Webb did. And if it's on their deathbed and they never spend a day in jail for that, we'll just have to live with that. But I think the families could live with that as well. We could live with that. But here's what I also know. This should not have taken this long. As I continue to state, it's granted, we covered this disappearance on Unfound. You heard as much about Natasha and Susan's disappearances as you are ever going to hear anywhere. And it was clear that there were no new facts since the two went missing. And so I'm left with, well, what changed? Are the police really saying that this could not have been done 20 years ago? Because we have to think about it this way. We can understand if there's a disappearance and you have a set of facts and they really don't lead anywhere. You have a suspect or somebody, but there's nothing really factually that might hold up in court. And then somewhere down the road, there's a new fact. And then that person or people are charged. That makes all the sense in the world. New facts, new theories. New facts maybe lead to even more facts, new places to investigate. Bodies are found, a body is found, and then somebody is charged. That's not what happened here. The fact is, this disappearance, the disappearances of Susan and Natasha, was pretty much static from very early on. And so for the public, we're left wondering, why do we have to wait for these things? It's hard to understand. And the problem is that the police don't explain it. Now, I could realize that whoever went and questioned Larry Webb, and probably a lot of those people were on the police force back in 2000, might not be on the force now. They died, they retired, they moved, whatever else. So I get it that the law enforcement agency and all the members of it today are different than maybe back in 2000. But still, I still think that West Virginia State Police or whoever else owe the public an explanation of why it took this long when no facts changed for all this time. It's hard to understand. And I don't have an answer for you. Nobody has emailed me or messaged me. I don't have an answer. This is, I'm still searching for the answer, like I'm hoping some of you are as well. Just wonder why we have to wait this long for justice to occur when nothing changes. You know, they could have prosecuted Larry Webb, what, he's 82 now. They could have prosecuted him as an 82-year or as a 62-year-old too. Now I realize that he confessed and everything, but my perception, the way I understand this, way this all went down, is they've been working on this since last year. That before they could have ever predicted that Larry Webb was going to die in April of 2024. It's just a coincidence, I guess, that he dies on the same day that they're found. But they were issuing warrants last year. In fact, I think there was an update for the update episode that came out in December of 2023, where I think I might even talked about that. So there's that. The other thing I would like to say about this is to the judges out there, could this have been a warrant issue? Could it be that the police had every reason in the world to believe that Larry did it back in 2000, but they went in with the information to a particular judge, and the judge says, you know, that's not enough for a warrant? Certainly possible. If that's true, I'd like to know about it. And it very well may be true that over the years, West Virginia State Police and whoever else, whatever their agencies, revisited the disappearance, went to another judge, and once again got rejected. And then more recently, maybe they found just a more friendly judge or something. Maybe. I don't know. This is all just guessing. But my message to judges out there is that you got to give these police a few more tools in all of this. I realize we have rights in the United States. I realize we certainly have property rights. Police just can't go on to anybody's property and start, rummaging around and expect that whatever they find to be admitted in court. I know. But certainly with Natasha and Susan Carter, along with everything that we knew about the disappearance. Once again, everything that was needed to be known about the disappearance was back in 2000. In my opinion, there was certainly enough to go onto Larry's property and look around. Certainly. Now, if the police didn't try to get a warrant, that's on them. But if we're having situations where the police in disappearance cases get a lot of circumstantial evidence and go to a judge and keep getting denied, I think there is room for a little more leniency in all of this. And I think that it would still hold up in court should somebody eventually get charged with a murder if something, of course, if remains are found or, evidence is found that certainly points toward a murder or something. I think so. I mean, we've covered so many disappearances. Maybe, of course, the stereotypical one is Angela Green in Kansas. Husband telling all sorts of stories, no facts to back them up. And still to this day, now granted, it's a relatively new disappearance, I think from 2019, relatively new, but still, to my knowledge, no law enforcement official has ever been permitted to go onto the Green property. Despite him with the stories about, oh, yeah, I had to take her to a mental hospital. Oh, yeah, she died in that hospital. Oh, yeah, I changed my mind. She actually got picked up by somebody and taken away. You're telling me that's not enough. Okay. So that's this is another one of Unfound's disappearances that has come to a complete resolution, like not too long ago, like Donald Irwin's. He was found, his car was found in that little body of water. We now have a total resolution to Natasha and Susan Carter's disappearances, in contrast to what we might just call partial resolutions, maybe with Tom Brown, Eric Franks, and maybe a few others. But with Natasha and Susan, a full resolution with, unfortunately, they were murdered and the remains have been found. Larry Webb was their killer. And now everybody knows that. All right, moving on. Let's talk about David Schultz. He was the guy, let me see here. The trucker. He was the guy who was a trucker, and he just picked up some pigs, and he was supposed to deliver them. He never showed up there. And eventually his truck was found on the side of the road. I don't think it was like on a major highway or anything, but on maybe a 2-lane road. And he was nowhere to be found. Well, his body was found since the last Unfound Live. And so I'm going to read this article to you. And I'm, of course, going to give as best an analysis I can do at this time. Authorities say the body of a 53-year-old Iowa trucker, David Schultz, has been found 5 months after he went missing, just days after Thanksgiving. So that's how long that has been. Preliminary autopsy reports showed no signs of trauma or serious injury. So meaning no bullet holes, no broken arms, no stabbings, nothing like that. Schultz was slated to deliver the pigs to a farm near Sac City on November 21st when a semi-trailer truck was found that afternoon on northbound U.S. Highway 71. Maybe it was on the highway, I guess. Authorities say the body, using dental records, Iowa's Office of the State Medical Examiner was able to identify a body discovered in Sac County on April 24th as belonging to David. Schultz was located in a farm field in the 1900 block of Union Avenue in Sac County. Preliminary autopsy results, so no signs of trauma, like I just said. Further autopsy test results are pending, so I'm guessing they'll check for drugs and other things. Poison, whatever. Officials noted they do not suspect foul play in his death. Schultz was reported missing on November 21st, and he was last heard from that early morning. The married father of twin boys was slated to deliver the pigs to a farm. Reporters repeating information. According to the Sioux City Journal, the trailer wasn't pulled over off the side of the road, but was not turned off. The pigs were also still inside the truck. Hundreds searched for Schultz after his disappearance, with a reward offered for information that led to the location of the body. Then on April 24th, the State Department of Public Safety said the sheriff's office received a call from an individual who reported having discovered a body in his field. Before a positive identification had been made, the AP of Associated Press reported that David's wife, Sarah, was told that the person whose body was found was wearing boots that matched her husband's and his keys were found in the pants pocket. He was such a good father, Sarah told reporters on April 25th. It's not fair. She went on to say that while she's glad we know where he is now, there are still so many questions about what happened. Things don't make sense. So I have not looked at a map. Maybe some of you have done that. I've not taken a look to see how far this location was from his truck. But of course, there have been many articles that I've read. This is just a particular one that I've chosen to read tonight on this show. All of them pretty much say in so many words, he was found not too far from his truck. Not too far. Now, not too far, of course, is relative. Me driving to Orlando is kind of far, but it's not too far compared to me driving to Pennsylvania. I guess it just depends. But given that there's no signs of foul play, there's no bruising, there's no shootings, there's no stabbings, and as it says in this article, officials don't seem to think that there was foul play, then what are we talking about here? Well, I have to admit that the first thing that came to my mind, and you should know that given that they're still alive, but both of my brothers used to be truck drivers. Brother Brian, brother Michael. Michael was a truck driver for about 3 years. My other brother Brian was a driver for about 13 years. This is a job he had when we first met in 1994. In fact, I remember going out to his truck that he had at the time. I remember it was in Ohio on Route 80. It was really cold out and everything. It was a gold something. And of course, there are truckers out there who do drugs to stay awake. There are no allegations of that at this time. But that was something that came to mind. Was he taking some sort of drug to keep him awake? And something happened. What also, though, occurs to me is that being that the truck, we have to remember the truck was pulled over to the side of the road. It wasn't like he wrecked it and disappeared. It wasn't like it was like what we might say in an odd location or oddly put somewhere or anything like that. So it would seem to believe that at least at the time that he parked the truck, he stopped the truck, that he was in his right mind. I have to admit, are we sure that he wasn't walking off into this field or something to go to the bathroom and had a heart attack? This is something else, or a stroke, something like that. You would think, of course, it all depends on what kind of heart attack. Of course, there's many, many different kinds of heart attacks. There's the Widowmaker, where nobody could survive it. I mean, even if you were in the hospital and had one, you'd still die. And then there's the kind where you have a heart attack, but there's been people who've had heart attacks that have driven themselves to the hospital. So there's a wide range of that. Of course, we might also maybe think about a stroke or an aneurysm, which those things, of course, there's a wide variety of those as well. And in fact, the drummer of Iron Maiden, if you didn't know, Nico McBrain, he had a stroke earlier this year and unfortunately survived from it. Could it be just went out there and it was just bad timing? Or maybe he felt something going on and he felt that he needed to pull the truck over. Maybe he thought, maybe I just need, some fresh air or something. And really, he was in the process of having a stroke or a heart attack and just collapses in the field. He's dead. It's very sad, very sad. But I'm hoping that this was not drug related. I'm hoping that this was just an unfortunate, bad, natural cause of death. I'm hoping. Will we find? The question is, will we find out? There's no guarantee that that we'll find out what the autopsy says. And it very well may be that no articles are written about David's disappearance again. This is how it happens. Sometimes we know. All of you watching this live show, you all take an interest in true crime and true crime news. You know how quickly some of these disappearances go out of the news. A body is found and then there's no follow-up. Well, they found the remains. Well, what happened? Was it a suicide? Was it an overdose? The only reason they really ever do any updates is if it is foul play. Everything else, there's no guarantee they're going to find out what happened. So we might have to get comfortable with the idea that we may never know. And the question is, do we have a right to know? We certainly don't have a right to know. But it would be nice to know. So that's where my head is right now. That it was an overdose of some type, but I'm hoping, like I said, I'm wishing this never happened. But I'm hoping it was just some natural cause of death. I look at his age, 53. That's my age. And, of course, we know a lot of people are overweight. A lot of people not taking care of themselves, even though we have more commercials about health and how to eat right and diets and exercising. And we have all these gyms and everything else. But people are still dying from heart attacks and strokes and everything from being overweight, not eating the right foods, and not taking care of themselves, on and on and on. And certainly truck drivers could be in one of those groups. Why? Well, they're sitting around all day. And then they pull over to the side of the road after so many hours because by law they have to, and they're in some rest area somewhere. And there's no gym nearby or anything. And then maybe if they do get something to eat, it's at one of these truck stops. And having been a lot of truck stops in my life, it's not exactly, you got to be really, 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 really disciplined to eat the right foods if you're a truck driver on the highways of the United States. And even like with my brother Brian, who, like I said, he was a truck driver for 13 years. It is amazing how much weight he lost after he stopped driving a truck. Now, granted, when we stopped driving, he was coincidentally around the age I am now, and he must have lost 50 pounds. Must have. So there's that. So that's on my mind. So let's see what everybody is saying. Everybody's saying hi to each other. Hey, Delaine's recommending a book to Hazel. Everything says about Larry Webb, if he didn't confess, it would still be unsolved. So not good police work. I agree. Everything, Delane. They got to have enough circumstantial evidence for the prosecution in the Green case. Delane, you would think. If we want to make a comparison, Delane, Certainly, they have more information on Angela Green's husband than they did on Michael Turney. Of course, we know Michael Turney has gotten off and can't be ever prosecuted again. But certainly, there's more circumstantial evidence against Angela Green's husband than against Michael Turney. Hazel says, David Schultz, how on earth was he found so close to where he disappeared? Good question, Hazel. I don't have it. Shree says 1.5 miles. Is that close? If that's true, Shree, I have no reason to think you're lying. I don't consider that to be close. But it does kind of go along with my idea of, what have I brought up before when it comes to searches? About a mile. Now, granted, if they only went on a mile, they wouldn't have found him because you'd have to go a half mile more. But it is amazing how many of these people are found not too far from where they were last seen their vehicle, whatever. 1.5 miles, that's still, if searches were done, of course, searches were done and they didn't find him. If it's 1.5 miles, maybe I can understand that. Rockford, yep, my mind went immediately. Hello, Rockford, by the way. Missed you last night, Rockford. Yet my mind went immediately to overdose. Could also be suicide in a manner that cops are keeping private out of respect to the family. Good point that pulling over could signal medical problem. Right. Suicide seems unlikely. He goes and picks up the pigs, then commits suicide. But on the other hand, he very well could have picked up the pigs and said, all right, I got to get to this next location and I'm tired. I got these drugs I got to take. Could be. I, of course, hope I'm hoping it's just a good old-fashioned heart attack. But 1.5 miles away, you would think that if he thought he was having a heart attack, he would have tried to call somebody. It doesn't seem that he did. It also seems unlikely that somebody having a heart attack would walk 1.5 miles. It also seems unlikely that a person having a stroke would go 1.5 miles. So I guess what I'm saying is maybe the natural causes theory is not looking too good right now. Delane, Ed, what episode was it that you talked extensively about the probability of failing to find a missing person, even if the person is within the search area? I think it is when we covered that case, the young man in Canada. Yeah, that was Kathy's gonna have it before me. Not Ryan Stuka. That was much more recently than that one. That was Jamie Lee, Delane. Jamie Lee, where I went through all of the permutations of area and radius and diameter and all of that. Jamie Lee, yes, the disappearance from Canada. Yes. Hello, Ferry. I just got off work. Yeah, I'm here. Well, hello. Yay, I'm here too, Ferry. How about that? Yeah, but yeah, it was Jamie Lee. Yeah, that's not close to me. That's a lot of area. Hi, Ferry. Hi, Ryan. Hated to miss the tank, but it was a rare week when I couldn't get to the episode. Listen today on my long commute. All right, well, Rockford, maybe you want to post something, and I can pass along to everybody in the think tank. So we can get your insights into David Fugate's disappearance. Delane. Kathy says, no, it wasn't Ryan. Yeah, it's Jamie Lee, Delane. I think natural causes makes the most sense. Sheree is saying, all right, so Sheree's going the opposite direction from me. The body responds in odd ways under extreme stress. Okay. All right, so Sheree's still holding out for a natural cause death. Not that's going to bring him back, but it's very, very sad. But certainly, if his family finds out that he died due to an overdose, I mean, that would just add, insult to the worst of injuries. Charlotte, maybe someone forced him out of his truck, but it doesn't make sense because they didn't steal the pigs in the truck. Well, they already said there's no foul play, Charlotte. So, when we think foul play, I know what I think of. Broken bones, bullet holes, stabbings, knocks to the head, broken necks and things. It doesn't seem like he had any of those. That's what they're saying. No signs of foul play. Yeah. So, but I have to admit, not a surprise to me. Maybe a surprise that he was 1.5 miles away. But I can tell you, at no time did I think that this was some sort of foul play. I realized there was a lot of talk of that, and I certainly wish the general population could analyze these things a little better, but it just never looked like foul play to me. I have a hard time understanding that, and this kind of goes back to kind of one of the themes of the Caleb Harris Unfound now that came out today, entering into the evidence locker things that don't belong there. Same thing. Well, it must have been, well, it had to have been foul play. Yeah, but there's no facts to support that regarding David Schultz. Before his body was found, looking at the truck, the truck's still there. The pigs are still there. What exactly happened? So David Schultz, very sad. I hope we do find out what exactly killed him, but I would not be surprised if we don't. All right, next story I want to cover, and I thank Assistant Moderator Cherie for letting me know about this. This is Suzanne Morphew. Yeah, I'm just going to type this in here so everybody sees it. Hold on one second. Okay. Suzanne Morphew. After Suzanne Morphew went missing in 2020 and her remains were found in 2023, an autopsy found Morphew died by undetermined means in the setting of butorphanol, azaparone, and medetomidine intoxication. Boy, I butchered all of that. According to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, Morphew's death has been ruled a homicide. Well, being that she was buried, I don't think we need to know about all those drugs to know that she was murdered, given that she was buried. According to the Mayo Clinic, butorphanol can be used as a nasal or an injection and is used to relieve pain severe enough to require opioid treatment. Science Direct, a peer-reviewed journal, says azaparone is a tranquilizer often used in veterinary care, and medetomidine is used in anesthesia. These drugs are marketed as a compounded injectable chemical immobilizer for wildlife, providing pharmacological reversible analgesia, sedation, and immobilization. Well, I'll just get right to it. As Cherie alerted me, and then I took it upon myself to look at what everybody was, the news articles that were being written about it today. This is all certainly something, given that her husband, Barry, was at least at one time involved in the business of going out and shooting deer with darts and then hurting them. And not hurting them, Herding, where he would go out and not kill the animals. He would shoot them with tranquilizer darts. They would fall asleep. He would then take these animals to a farm, like a big land, where then, and I know this is all disgusting and everything, but this is what they did. They would then take them to a farm where people would go to be in like a controlled hunting atmosphere. So the deer are knocked out to then wake up again in some sort of very, very, very large farm area that's fenced and everything, where then people could go in and shoot them. And so it sounds to me like the drugs that were found in Suzanne Morphew are the same drugs that would have been in these darts that were used to knock out these deer. Yeah, that's bad news for Barry. I think that this is, of course, and I realize many, many people have thought that he, even before this came along, that he murdered her. And also, as you know, I've been much more on the fence about all of this. This is probably the piece that, for me, pushes me into the area of, yeah, that's not a coincidence. That is certainly not a coincidence that these drugs were found in her, and these would be the same kind of drugs that would be used on animals. And in fact, it even says used by veterinarians. So, bad news, I think, for Barry. Now, the full autopsy obtained by Fox 31 on Monday said that Morphew's skeletal remains and part of her clothing were submitted for examination. The coroner found no indication of trauma to her body at the time of death. The autopsy also said that a weathered bullet was found along with the remains and is in the custody of the CBI. So on one hand, no indication of trauma, so no bullet holes, but a weathered bullet was found with the remains. Interesting. However, it's important to note that clinical history found that Morphew was receiving maintenance ridazine chemotherapy after the complete remission of recurrent follicular lymphoma. Let me see here. Nextstar's Fox 21 spoke to Barry over the phone in 2020 and asked what he would like to tell the people who thought he did it. Barry responded with the following: absolutely not. He answered, I love my wife. I would never hurt my wife. She is the light of mine and my daughter's lives. This whole thing is killing us, and that is why I want our privacy. In 2022, the district attorney for the 11th Judicial District ultimately dismissed the murder charge against Barry without prejudice, which means they can bring charges again. In documents released in 2022 before the case was dismissed, one of the CBI agents who had been working on the case told an internal affairs investigator, that Barry Morphew had been arrested prematurely and it was the worst decision that could be made. Nearly a year after the charges were dismissed, his attorneys filed a complaint against the district attorney and prosecutors involved in the case. The allegations of misconduct ranged from unethical practices and continued pattern of discovery violations to failure to respond to security concerns for court personnel and violations of the Victims' Rights Act. Years-long investigation came to a head on September 27th of 2023 when Morphew's remains were found and positively identified. Her remains were found in Saguache Canyon during an unrelated search of the area. Yes, she was found by accident. So let's see what everybody is saying here. Hazel says, I haven't heard this news saying Suzanne news yet. Well, happy to inform you. Hazel says, he drugged her? Her autopsy results points right to Bear, Delane says. Charlotte says, how terrible. Delane says he used the darts to cut off the antlers. It's all disgusting to me. Hazel, the darts were always a theory. Now it's for real. Wow, says Ferry. Delane says they found a dart in the clothes dryer. Delane, he claimed that he had been shooting chipmunks, but I think he was chasing Suzanne around the property. So he shoots her, knocks her out. That's just crazy. It is absolutely crazy. So I guess we'll see what transpires for Barry. What are you thinking? Is he going to be charged with murder before the end of the week or tomorrow? Or does anybody in the chat tonight want to make any predictions on that? Now that this new information has come out, how quickly do you think they are going to bring new charges against Barry Morphew? And so with that, I'm going to move on to the other story, but that was something that I included right before the show started tonight. That's certainly big, big news. All right, moving on. I meant to get to this last week, but I want to talk about it. And I just have this titled, What Men Will Do. A German billionaire who vanished under mysterious circumstances under Switzerland's iconic Matterhorn Peak. My parents were at Matterhorn 6 years ago. Is suspected to be living with a Russian mistress in Moscow. German-American tycoon Karl Ervan Haub, H-A-U-B, then 58, was training for a ski mountaineering race when he disappeared in April 2018 in Zermatt, Switzerland. The billionaire businessman was last seen heading up the mountain in a lift one morning alone. Something his trainer said was strange for a man who is typically very safety conscious and well prepared, and never returned to his hotel. Christian is now subject to an investigation by the Cologne prosecutor's office on suspicion of making false statements under oath. Christian is this guy's brother. Christian assumed control of the Tengelmann Group after his brother's disappearance and claimed to have commissioned a security service to investigate the rumors he was still alive. His lawyer, Mark Binz, told German newspaper Die Zeit, Achtung, baby. Of course, there's nothing to the accusation. Retail mogul Haub, who would now be aged 64, is alleged to have called Emilova's phone, this is the mistress, 13 times in the 3 days before he vanished in 2018. The calls were substantial, one lasting more than an hour, leading to suspicions he was plotting to fake his own death with help from Moscow and Ermolova. The investigation found that Ermolova, 44, ran an inconspicuous event agency in St. Petersburg, Russia, not St. Petersburg, Florida, which is right down the street, which organized skiing, hiking, and climbing excursions for outdoor enthusiasts. But she is also suspected of being involved with Russia's FSB security service. She is now listed on LinkedIn as a marketing director at Russian Event, which is styled as a travel experience company. An investigation by Tengelmann later revealed that Haub's life was closely intertwined with the enigmatic Ermolova, who is believed to be some 20 years Haub's junior and was described as a slim, athletic woman with shoulder-length brown hair, dark eyes, and an open smile. Yeah. Investigators suggested that she may work for the Russian domestic secret service. What can be proven, however, is that she was always in the same places at the same time as Karl Ervan Haub. In July 2008, both were in Moscow and Sochi within a few days. Sochi is where the Winter Olympics were held in Russia some years ago. In May 2009, both traveled on the same night train from Moscow to St. Petersburg. Doesn't that sound romantic? Taking a night train from Moscow to St. Petersburg. It'd be great if it wasn't in Russia. The trips were booked at the same time and by the same person. Strange too, Ermolova came to Moscow the day before just to take the train back home. I always like to do that sometime. You know, kind of a Orient Express or something like that. Of course, here in the United States, our train system sucks. But further overlaps of short trips, and they get into how their schedules overlap so many times. The report states, it is not clear why these alleged meetings took place. It doesn't sound like a love vacation, really. A journalist speculated that Haub's disappearance in Switzerland and alleged appearances in Russia may have come as a result of shady business dealings. Karl is known to have done business with questionable people in the Russian economy. Our assumption is that business with Russia or with Russian business partners could have got Karl Ervan in trouble in the West. And so that goes on and on and on talking about this. And let's see if there's anything else I want to read. The exact method used by Haub to conduct his alleged escape is not known. Some believe he skied through the Alps and descended into Italy, but there's no trace of his whereabouts after he set out on a solo ski tour in April 2018. Now, you should know in this article, there was at least one picture of him more recently where it really does look like he really did take off to be with this Ermolova woman and was hiding out. And it very well may be because there were problems going on at this company. And maybe he got promised by the Russian government or whatever that they would protect him. All certainly possible. Of course, my first point is men don't do this. In a way, this billionaire guy is, in a way, no different than Larry Webb. let's just admit it. Larry Webb got caught up with Susan Carter because he was a lot younger than she was. And for certain guys, I have to be honest, I like to stick to women around my own age. But, guys, don't do this. Don't do this. I mean, it's easy for me to talk. I'm a single guy. I have no commitments or allegiances to anyone, but guys, do not get caught up with these women. Don't do it. You're going to regret it. And women the same way. Women, don't get caught up with these types of guys. Don't do it. You're going to live to regret it. Now, it very well may be that this guy, if he was doing some shady business dealings and went to Russia to hide out and they were going to protect him and everything, yeah, that works for now. But I don't know if it's going to work forever. I got to believe, going back to Larry Webb, I'm inclined to believe that when Larry Webb killed Natasha and Susan in 2000, I'm guessing he thought he was going to get away with it. That he would die before he ever became so weak that he would confess to it. Obviously, that's not what worked out. That's not what happened. Fortunate for us. Fortunate for Rick Lafferty. So these men getting caught up, these women, kind of black widows. And you see, it's not every month maybe, but, I keep my eyes on all sorts of different kinds of news articles. And, there are women who are spies for other countries in the United States right now who are just looking to get some powerful guy, rich guy, CEO under their thumb. That's going on right now. And in fact, given that Florida is the third most populated state, there are certainly some here, as there are men doing the same thing. You gotta watch out for this stuff about getting set up. And before you know it, you're sending secrets, to China, to Iran, to North Korea. And it all can happen just so damn quickly. So this is one thing that comes to mind. Of course, the other thing is that, there's a kind of paradox here that I see in a disappearance such as this. And we even run into this in the United States. And it's this whole thing about, what do police say? Well, adults are allowed to leave their lives. Family goes in. My 25-year-old son is missing. He was there and then he wasn't there. What do police say? Well, he's allowed to leave. On the other hand, what happens though? And it happened, of course, with this guy, this billionaire guy, but it happens with regular people too. What also happens? On one hand, adults are allowed to leave their lives. But then on the other hand, if they're found alive, what do the police say? Well, we're going to make sure no laws were broken here. Why does that seem like a contradiction to me? You just said they're allowed to leave their lives. They're allowed to go and do whatever they want to do. They're allowed to go to Florida, to California, change their name, live out a totally different life and everything else. But now that they're found, you're actually going to look into them, see if they broke any laws. Why didn't you just do that in the first place? It's hard to understand. And I think, once again, the more and more we look at these kind of cliches that are put out there by law enforcement, a lot of people, unfortunately, in the true crime community, when you really start to analyze them, you start to say these things that have been said over and over and over for many years don't make any sense. And the actions that have been taken over and over and over don't make any sense. Well, they're allowed to leave. Then why do you investigate them when they come back? Get it? All right, so let's see what's going on here in the chat. Mother's Day. All right. Yeah, and and this all happened to Sharice reminding us Suzanne Morphy did go missing on Mother's Day. Yeah. Rockford says, speaking of drugging people and what men will do, have you watched the documentary Who Killed Robert Wone? Rockford, Reggie just sent me something about that this evening. I was not familiar with the name, but once I started reading about it, I'm very familiar with it. And I kind of offered up a couple different insights to her on it. Reggie Scott and I are discussing. I've sent Reggie my thoughts, Rockford. Charlotte Rockford, is that the case where the man stayed all night? Yep, that's that one. I ain't getting caught up with any kind of guy again, Hazel says. Okay, Hazel. And neither is Cherie. Ferry says, me neither. Got a lot of single women in the audience tonight. Rockford, Charlotte, yep, it's mind-boggling. Never ever thought I could get interested in a case where cause of death and perpetrators are known. Yet the puzzle is incredibly intriguing and perplexing. If everybody doesn't know, Robert Wone he was murdered in a, apartment or something in Washington, D.C., and there were three other guys. He was the straight guy. He was married. The three other guys in this apartment were all gay, and they were in a polyamorous relationship. The three of them were all in a relationship together. And Robert Wone was stabbed to death. He stabbed multiple times. And they haven't been able to prove that any one of these three guys who were surely there when this happened did it. And in fact, they even took these guys to court. They were charged with a variety of charges. And the jury found them not guilty. So I guess technically they're still looking for the murderer of Robert Wone. You're right. It is something. Like I said, Rockford, I did send my thoughts to Reggie. Let's see. I'll check that out. I have Peacock. Yeah, Rockford says, it wasn't like some long dissertation, Rockford. It was kind of short and to the point, like kind of two different ideas that came to my mind. And like I said, I've read about it before, so maybe they were always, it wasn't like I sat down. It was just, I knew about these murders from before, and just today, just a couple things came in my mind. All right, so this is this guy, once again, Carl Eravon Hobb, who went missing, but maybe he's not missing at all. And, and I tried to find, was he married? Did he run off from his wife? Really could not find that information. So where do I want to go next? No, did that. Talked about that. Suzanne, let me go through here. No, crime stories. Let me see here. The haunting conclusion. Here's one I want to go. I've been meaning to talk about this for a while. And this is a story out of Kentucky. People are searching for a man whose car was found abandoned in Dawson Springs, Kentucky, approximately 4 hours away from where he was last seen near his home in Florence weeks ago. Roy Foster Jackson, 83, was last seen April 7th near his home in Florence, the Caldwell County Sheriff's Office said. On Monday, Jackson's car was found abandoned in a field next to the Trustee Cemetery in Dawson Springs. Over the next 3 days, an extensive search was organized to look from the area. As of Friday afternoon, Jackson has not been found. Lieutenant James DiStefano of the Lauderdale County Sheriff's Office in northern Alabama said the department was made aware of Jackson's disappearance after Kentucky police ran his car tag back to Alabama. Deputies then did a welfare check at Jackson's home in Florence, but did not find him. DiStefano said through Jackson's sister, whom is believed to be his only next of kin, deputies learned that Jackson suffers from dementia, is diabetic, and has not been heard from in several days leading up to his car being found. They feel like he started driving, got turned around, and didn't know what he was doing. Kind of like David Hardy Jr. An investigation into his journey from Florence to Dawson Springs revealed Jackson had made his way through Nashville at one point during his drive. Jackson's last credit card activity was found in Russellville, Kentucky, roughly an hour away from where his car was ultimately found. Anyone with information on Jackson's location is encouraged to call the Caldwell County Sheriff's Office at 270-365-2088 or the Dispatch Center non-emergency line at 270-365-2041. This is, kind of talked about this before, but I am destined to talk about this as much as I can when I run across a story like this. I cannot tell all of you enough. When your parents or whoever else get like this, you got to take the keys. You got to take them. You got to. Unless you're comfortable with that person, maybe your husband or wife, or like I said, one of your parents, driving off and then their car being found out in the middle of nowhere and they can't be found. Unless you're comfortable with that. If you're comfortable with that, doesn't seem like a very good way to be. But you got to take the keys. This is very sad. Very sad. Guy driving around obviously is having dementia issues, doesn't know where he is, probably eventually scared out of his mind. He's driving around these roads, doesn't know where he is, and then stops his car and seemingly walks off. I realize a lot of times the general public thinks, well, there might be foul play. Well, maybe. I mean, people are being taken advantage of all the time. Certainly older people, if he was walking along the road as an old man, very possible that somebody saw him as a possible victim. But either way, we know that he was driving around aimlessly because he didn't know where he was, because his brain just doesn't work that well anymore. And it's obvious, being that it's right there in the article, that the people who knew him knew that he was suffering from this, and they just allowed him to keep doing it. You know, as I've told you before, you know, my father is no spring chicken. He's 87 years old. And certainly one of the ways that I keep tabs on him is that I allow him to drive once in a while. You know, how's he doing as a driver? Can he find places? And I was just talking to my dad on Saturday. He went like an hour away to go see a buddy of his, came back, no problem. And riding around with him, he knows all these roads. I'll be driving, but, you know, we'll be on some Pennsylvania back road and say, oh, make a right here. We got to go down this road. He knows exactly where he was going. And it's good to me because that shows me he still has his mind, which makes me very happy. That's easier for him. It's easier certainly for me. But for all those kids out there who have parents that are getting to a certain age, and we know, unfortunately, dementia, you know, I've read where it can start hitting people in their 50s and 60s. If they start showing any of these signs as well, you got to take the keys. It's going to suck. It's going to, but you got to do it. Now, happily, there are some people who get to the point they realize they can't drive anymore. That was my biological mother, Suzanne. Yes, her name's Suzanne. That she got to the point, although her mind was just fine, that she just physically did not feel comfortable going out there and driving on the roads of Pittsburgh anymore. She just said, you know, and I don't know if I should be out there anymore. Like I said, though, she had her mind and everything, but she could look at her eyesight, your hearing, and all of that, and say, you know, maybe it's just best for everybody that I'm not out there. Maybe for my safety and everybody else's safety. That takes a lot of courage. My impression is not too many old people get to that point. I think my impression of people is they want to drive until the day they die, no matter what physical or mental conditions, because it's a sense of freedom. I know that's the way it is for my dad. He knows if he can't drive anymore, he's stuck at home. And that's fine for me. I'm a homebody. My dad is the opposite of that. He gets cabin fever. He wants to get out in the car and go somewhere. And a lot of times when I'm up there seeing him, it's me at home doing Unfound work and him driving, going out, in the morning and doing whatever. He has to get out. He gets antsy, ants in the pants. But for their safety, and for everybody's safety, got to take the keys. Why don't people do this? Well, like I said, when you take somebody's keys, then suddenly maybe that person becomes your problem. And there's going to be arguments, and there's going to be gnashing of teeth and and all these things. But you got to do it. And we have to keep in mind this kind of disappearance. As you know, here at Unfound, I put differences or disappearances in categories. This is a type of disappearance that you can surely predict is going to become much, much, much more common in the next 10 years. Why? Because we got baby boomers. Baby boomers pretty much in their 70s right now, but there's a reason that they call baby boomers. We had this huge population boom after World War II. All these people having kids. Of course, the birth rate is greatly reduced since then. But if 50, late 40s into early 60s, the baby boomer generation, and then comes Generation X, which is what I'm in. We got this huge millions and millions of people who are getting up to that 75, 78, 80-year-old range, and their minds aren't going to hold on forever. And so you can predict that a lot of these people aren't going to want to give up their keys once they start having Alzheimer's and dementia. So you're going to see a lot of disappearances like this. No doubt about it. Will that continue? Are there more baby boomers or Generation Xers? Maybe probably more baby boomers, I guess. The big issue with my generation of Gen Xers is suicide. More for whatever reason. A lot of 50-year-olds more than ever taking their own lives for whatever reason. Whereas with baby boomers, we can certainly predict as many as there are, the highways of the United States are going to be getting more dangerous because a lot of these people are not going to want to give up their keys. So their kids are going to have to take them. I hope they do. I know it sucks. Let's see what everybody is saying. Okay. Charlotte says his car was a long way from home. Yeah, I know. He was driving around, didn't know where he was going, Charlotte. I can't imagine the kind of fear that he must have had. And that's the way you have to think about it. Do you really want to allow somebody that you love to put themselves in a position where they are fearing for their lives? They are terrified because they don't know where they are and they can't get home. Do you really want to do that? Ferry said, Ed, that was my dad too. Ferry says, yeah, no one does, Ed. Like I said, I give my biological mother, Suzanne, all the credit in the world. Of course, she died in 2018, as did my mother. Loretta Dentzel died. 2018 was a horrible year. Suzanne was just like, one day, you know what? I just don't think I should be driving anymore. I just have so much respect for that. My perception is very few people do that. Delane says, thankful that my Grammy decided for herself when it was time to stop driving. My daddy, on the other hand, he was tough about that. He wanted us to bring his truck to the rehab center so he could, leave when he wanted to. They had to put an ankle monitor on him because he escaped a couple of times. Oh my, Delane. Rockford, when it comes to old age travel and having some adult beverages, I'm thankful we now have Uber and Lyft. Seriously, a game changer. Yeah. The only issue, Rockford, is good luck teaching an 80-year-old how to use Uber or Lyft. Blaine Rockford, yeah, just take Mary to make sure you're really getting into this Uber car and not some random weirdo. Cranky. Heard 2 weeks ago on another podcast, the person responsible for the Springfield 3 isn't alive anymore, and that person that knows who's responsible isn't alive anymore either. They're saying a cop. Well, Cranky, a lot of people say a lot of things. That's my answer to that. Charlotte, I think that the really young drivers are a danger. Well, they are, and that's why their insurance rates are the highest, Charlotte. But the American roads are certainly going to get more dangerous, not because of more young people, but because of more old people. And I think about this. As a 53-year-old, I don't know if I'm going to make it to my 80s or not, but I do think about what kind of driver am I going to be if I get into my 80s and I still have my mind and everything. I'm hoping I don't drive like the 80-some-year-olds I see around here. Rockford, I will gladly give up my keys when it's my time. In my view, it's a trade-off. I lose a bit of independence and I gain an excuse for midday margaritas. Well, that's nice, Rockford. Unfortunately, I don't drink. Delane, the driver's more likely to think I'm the random weirdo. Yeah, Rockford is a weirdo. Of course, I jest. One more story, and this goes to the tyranny of cliches in the title of the show tonight. 40 years after she left her newborn to die in a wooded New Jersey area on Christmas Eve, Mary Catherine Snyder Crumlick was living a suburban life in South Carolina with her husband and sons. But earlier this month, April, 57-year-old Crumlick was sentenced to a year behind bars for manslaughter in the death of the infant Mendham Township Police called Baby Mary. During their decades-long investigation, Mendham Township Police Chief Ross Johnson told Fox News Digital a DNA profile was established for the baby girl in 2014, and a lot of great police work solved the decades-old cold case. Crumlick, who was just 17 when she left the child, her umbilical cord still intact, wrapped inside a towel in a plastic bag, which two young boys playing in a stream found and reported to police. The death was ruled a homicide after a coroner determined the child had died before she was placed in the bag. The baby girl's identity was not known, but the Reverend Michael Drury of St. Joe's Church baptized her. Johnson told Fox News Digital. Each year on Christmas Eve, Johnson said, officers would visit the grave for a memorial service. Wow. It became a part of a yearly tradition. We didn't want baby Mary to be forgotten. It was such a horrible act, really senseless in every sense of the word. We wanted to make sure she was remembered every Christmas Eve. That is incredible. It was completely unnecessary. Even in the 1980s, there were so many resources in our area. It didn't need to go down that way for sure. When a DNA profile was established for the child, her case was reopened by the Morris County Cold Case Unit. With the help of a genealogist, detectives looked for families living in the area who had daughters between 16 and 19 years old and whose racial and ethnic backgrounds matched the girls. There was never a belief that it was just some random person from out of town. The spot was so specific, it would have to be someone from the area. Detectives interviewed dozens of families and chased a litany of tips and theories. Finally, they found a match for baby Mary's DNA, an area man who had died by suicide years later in 2009 or 10. It is our firm belief he had no knowledge of this. That's why his name hasn't been anywhere, Johnson said. We had no evidence that he had any idea that he was the father of that particular child, let alone that Crumlick was even pregnant. Maybe he wouldn't have committed suicide if he knew. Maybe if he had a kid, if the kid didn't die, the story would be different. Through his family, they zeroed in on Crumlick, who had moved to suburban Columbia, South Carolina. She was arrested on April 23rd last year and charged as a juvenile due to her age at the time of the offense. If she had been convicted as an adult, it would have been on a second-degree manslaughter charge. Law enforcement was able to refer to her by name until her conviction earlier this month. On April 3rd, Johnson said Crumlick began a 364-day sentence at the Morris County Correctional Facility. I just want to read all of this. Delaying the driver is more likely, and delays. Okay, laughing. The reason I say I call this story the tyranny of cliches is that what do we hear? Women. I realize this is a unique story. I realize that this is not common. But the whole thing about women don't leave their children. Women kill their children. Men kill their children. Men leave their children. It's all on the table when it comes to disappearances and murders. It's all on the table. We can never just make some blanket statement like somebody wouldn't do something like this. They would. And we have all the statistics in the world, at least here in the United States, that say so. When kids go missing, most likely the parents did it, or at least one parent did it. When kids are murdered, most likely at least one parent did it. And then you have to add in all of the people who knew the children. They're also very likely to have caused the child to go missing. We have to remember, like, for example, Jacob Wetterling. That is the exception. He is not the rule. His disappearance and murder is not the rule. It's the exception. That he was picked up by some stranger and murdered is not as common as if Jacob Wetterling would have been killed by his parents or somebody who knew him very well. So this whole cliche, realize I'm here to help families and everything, but you also have to realize that when one of the guests says she wouldn't have left her family, well, it very well may be looking at the evidence that she didn't. But certainly I'm just not going to accept that because somebody says so. There are things within the true crime community that are sentences and phrases that people just throw out that just aren't true. They're just accepted and they have no basis in fact. It's just people. It's just things people say. Another one of those is, another cliche is, someone knows something. Sometimes. But I will also say that, my guess is like 35% of the disappearances that Unfound is covered, nobody caused that disappearance. 35%. That's a considerable percentage. So I'm inclined to believe sometimes nobody knows anything. The only person who knows what happened in the disappearance is the missing person himself or herself. I think there's even a true crime podcast out there called Someone Knows Something. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Like David Fugate from Friday. It very well he might have been murdered. But if he left on his own, surely nobody knows that except David. And and of course, maybe the reason I hate cliches is because I've been a writer, and one of the things you first learn if you want to be a fiction novelist, stay away from cliches. Generate your own phrases, your own unique, artistic, creative phrases. Don't use cliches. Don't do that. It sucks. And maybe I've just kind of brought that into my true crime work. So just the tyranny of cliches. Cliches can rule us. They can. They're easy outs, and a lot of times they aren't true. Rockford says, I always think of your Mark Allen, Iowa Paperboy episode when this topic comes up. Yeah. Right. And I realize his brother was the guest, and his brother thinks that somebody out there killed him. But I'll also say there's not really a lot of reason to believe that. Especially how I view the other two missing boys who went missing kind of around the same time. How I view theirs and compare that to his. Those to his. We are raising one that our mother just said, not my child, you take care of her. I'm sorry to hear that, Delane. And Ferry says, I work for Child Protective Services. Yes, parents certainly do harm their children. Thank you for backing me up, Ferry. All right, let's go to this Friday. Technically, we are covering 2 disappearances on Friday, but mainly only talking to one of the families. This would be the disappearances of Stevie Hammerly and Joe Grashner. This comes to us from Manhattan, Kansas, not Manhattan in New York City. Manhattan, Kansas. And this occurred on August 22nd of 1981. The guests, two guests, are Stevie's ex-girlfriend, Lisa Duvall, and Stevie's daughter. And if you can believe it, Lisa Duvall named her daughter Lisa. So we had a fun time with that during the interviews. Stevie's daughter, Lisa Faircloth. So I interviewed two Lisas at the same time. Don't worry, it all came up fine in the end. And Stevie was paralyzed from the waist down, and Joe was kind of his caretaker, would, push him around on the wheelchair, in a wheelchair. And they went missing from a party that they attended. And it took Stevie's family, his ex-girlfriend, I guess, and her daughter, 30 years to find out actually, truthfully, what happened at this party. And it had everything to do with child molestation. So you can start looking that one up for Friday. Stevie Hammerle, Hammerle, and Joe Grashner, Grashner. And both Lisas did fantastic jobs. And yes, I did think Lisa in the Call Jam. Yes, it did occur to me while interviewing them. So Charlotte, one more. I have to answer Charlotte's question before we're done tonight, even though we've gotten to 11 o'clock. Charlotte, maybe Charlotte's already left, unfortunately. She asked me, how much do you consider weather when it comes to disappearances? Actually, I consider it very much. Of course, the weather is not so much a question when it comes to disappearances where we think it's foul play, but certainly for ones that are walk-offs, when we start looking at rain and snow and water levels and rivers and how they were at the time and temperatures, certainly temperature played a huge role in the death of Crystal Morrison. We might think that it played, heat played a role or cold played a role, and maybe some others like Ryan Stuka. If you believe that he walked off in the snow and the cold and everything, that certainly could have played a role. Weather is certainly important, but really, I really just only take a look at that for disappearances that I do not believe are foul play. If the circumstances in those non-foul play disappearances say that I should look at the weather to figure out what was going on, I do it some. I wouldn't say a lot, but certainly weather can play a role. Like Chance Engelbert, remember that storm that was rolling through when he was trying to walk back to Wyoming? Certainly believe the weather that day played a role in his disappearance. So there you go. That's the show. This Unfound Live for Monday, April 29th. Got a lot covered tonight. I'm very happy about that. I hope you enjoyed it. Please give this video a thumbs up. Please give it a nice review on whatever podcast or platform. And that's all I have for this week. Sheree, thank you for moderating tonight. And Charlie, say hi to the kids for me. Good night, everyone.